In this video, you will learn how to always have a conversation to fall back on. You will learn how to keep a conversation interesting so it doesn't die out after a while, and how to avoid awkward silence by always knowing what to say next. Often before, I didn't want to talk to people I didn't know because I assumed that they were boring. I remember how I used to see small talk as something without a meaning or something to kill time, and I later learned that small talk actually has a very distinct purpose. It's a subconscious way for people to figure out if they like the person they talk to. It is as much about taking the time to see if you click as it is about the conversation itself. It is also a way to scout for similarities. Friendship works in such a way that the more similarities two people have in common, the more they will like each other. Questions is the only way for you to know if you share any similarities. Not only will it help you to find similarities, asking questions about the other person is a great way to make the person you are talking to enjoy the conversation. Just think about the positive feeling you get when someone shows interest in who you are and what you do. Here are some great universal questions that you can ask in almost any situation. How are you spending your time when you're not here? This is a smooth way of seeing whether someone is studying or working or unemployed or whatever he or she is doing. Where would you like the most to travel in the world? What would you most want to work with? What do you like doing the most when you don't work or study? What kind of music do you listen to? What TV series do you follow? You can get all these questions in a list by downloading the toolkit. These questions are effective because they scan many areas where you might have things in common with someone else. Like I mentioned earlier in this course, cultivate an interest in others and soon questions will pop up naturally in your head. Don't ask questions for the sake of asking questions. Ask questions for the sake of getting to know the other person. And here's an example to show what I mean. If I ask, what do you do when you're not here? And the person replies, I'm working as a web developer. And you say, okay, what are your plans for the night? Okay, that's asking questions for the sake of asking questions. It's weird and it will make the other person feel interviewed. If you instead continue by saying, oh, I see, what kind of developer? Or do you enjoy your job? Or how long have you been working with that? Okay, that's getting to know the other person. Despite how ridiculously obvious this may seem, people are actually really bad at asking questions like this. Don't forget to break off the questions every once in a while by adding your thoughts on the subject. By the end of the conversation, you want to have spent roughly the same amount of time talking. The importance here is to manage through the small talk and not be too fast in dismissing the other person as boring or uninteresting. It is amazing how many people you actually share interests with, but you need to scout for similarities to know. As soon as you find a similarity, it could be that you work in the same business or like the same music or movies or have the same interests or come from the same town and so on. You can delve into that. And in that moment, the conversation becomes interesting. The small talk scouting is over and you start building a friendship. When you have found something both are interested in, delve into that. And of course, sometimes you won't find any similarities, but you have to small talk to find out. Some people don't come up with things to say because they overanalyze and filter their conversations. They can have many thoughts and are constant in a conversation, but they filter it so hard they let too little out through talking. The filter often says, this is too uninteresting to say, or this is too obvious to say. You will be amazed by how much uninteresting or obvious things you can get away with. But here's the thing. In social situations, people get away with saying a lot of uninteresting and obvious things. People do not get away with standing quiet. You need to adjust your filter. If it A, relates in any way to the conversation and B, is not provoking, you can say it. Most people put their focus on trying to come up with more smart things to say, but it's more about adjusting your filter and let more of your ongoing inner conversation out. A question I often get that's related to this is, if you open up the filter, won't you finally come to a point where what you're saying actually becomes truly uninteresting? And the truth is, people basically think two things are interesting to talk about. One, themselves, and two, something they are interested in. As long as you talk about these two subjects, you never need to be afraid to come off as uninteresting. And of course, the idea is that you should find something you both should enjoy talking about by scouting for similarities. So, small talk has a purpose, and that is to check if you like each other and to scout for similarities. To find similarities, you must ask questions about the other person. Instead of trying to come up with things to say, just let more of your inner conversation out. Cultivate an interest in people by practicing coming up with questions about them in your mind. As long as what you say in some way relates to the conversation and is not offensive, you can say it. The other person will enjoy the conversation if you ask questions about the other person, and you will both enjoy the conversation when you find a similar interest or experience. If you haven't done it already, you can download the toolkit where you get all the advice in step-by-step form.